Thank you, Lou, for introducing us. My name is Michael Swan. I'm a Principal Facilities Planner with the Transit Friendly Planning Program, and I'm joined here today with Celeste Alcina. We're really excited to share the guide with you all. We released it back in February, and it's been a long time coming. It involved a stakeholder committee that assisted us with kind of a QA/QC before that went out, which I
Hello?
believe involved. Hi, Celeste.
Oh, that worked. Okay,
We
good.
can hear you. Um, so we're really excited to share this with you all today. Celeste is going to speak first about the individual chapters in the guide, and then I will discuss implementation tools and potential technical assistance opportunities. So I'll pass it back to Celeste now.
Thanks, Michael. Sorry about that. Again, so my name is Celeste Alcina. I'm a facilities planner in the Transit Friendly Planning Program, and you all met Michael a moment ago. He's a principal facilities planner, and we're really excited to share the updated Transit Friendly Guide with you all. So here's a throwback to the original handbook, also known as the Pink Book. It was published in 1994 and was widely used throughout New Jersey. And here is the cover of our updated guide. You can find it online at our website at njtransit.com/transitfriendly. We'll also drop links to our resources in the chat so you can access the resources we mentioned throughout the presentation. Michael should be dropping those momentarily. The guide is divided into the following 5 chapters. Chapter 1 is an introduction to transit-friendly planning. Chapter 2, Development and Design. Chapter 3, Access, Circulation, and Parking. 4, Planning for Active Transportation. And 5, Case Studies and Implementation. Chapter 1 of the guide is an introduction to transit-friendly planning in our program. Almost 30 years ago, NJ Transit's Transit-Friendly Planning Program was established to provide a partnership between NJ Transit and New Jersey communities. The program promotes planning initiatives that encourage transit-supportive development and transit ridership. This program has a rich history. We partnered with NJDOT in 1999 to create the Transit Village Initiative, and in 2005 we developed a transit-friendly development newsletter, which grew into njtod.org, an online weekly newsletter. And in 2010, we developed a TOD database that is known as the Transit Friendly Data Application. Throughout the years, this program has played a leadership role guiding growth through its technical assistance and partnerships. So NJ Transit's mission is to move New Jersey and the region by providing safe, reliable, and affordable public transportation that connects people to their everyday lives. The Transit Friendly Planning Program is dedicated to strengthening the link between public transit and land use through 6 key goals that are aligned with NJ Transit's 10-year strategic plan. The program strives to promote equitable, economically resilient, and environmentally sustainable development that improves quality of life for all New Jersey residents. And the 5 pillars of the TFP program include technical assistance, public education and community engagement, partnership development, data collection through our data app, and program management. These all ensure that NJ Transit supports the development of transit-friendly communities. Our program provides technical planning assistance to interested municipalities to create and implement context-sensitive, community-based vision plans. These plans help guide local growth, especially in areas where transit could stimulate new development opportunities and create strong community centers for people to live, work, and socialize. A critical component of this work has been outreach, community events, stakeholder engagement, consensus building, and partnerships. Examples of previous plans are shown on this slide in downtown Camden, Asbury Park, and with the Urban Essex Coalition. This guide is meant to promote great places around transit. It's also meant to be easy to read, so a community group, local official, or a student interested in transportation planning will be able to understand the concepts and the reasons behind them. Making a community transit friendly involves making development and redevelopment decisions that encourage residents to use transit for everyday trips, to access school, shopping, work, and other community destinations. Updating the guide was quite the process, going back to 2019. With the help of NV5, we assessed the existing program, looked at changes in the TOD landscape, and identified ways in which the program could be refined to further its reach and impact. The assessment and the path forward were reinforced through outreach with NJ Transit and external stakeholders. A stakeholder survey was distributed to professionals across the planning and development field in New Jersey. The survey asked about familiarity with the program, the largest barriers to TOD in New Jersey, and how the program can better help with transit supportive planning. So transit-friendly planning is guided by 10 principles. They include topics such as wayfinding and circulation. Other principles include providing convenient transfers and creating trails, and the principles are divided into the guide's 3 key chapters. In the next slides, I'll be highlighting one principle from each of these chapters. Chapter 2 is development and design, and it really sets the groundwork for the success of a transit-friendly place. The second principle, design a welcoming public realm, talks about sidewalk and open space. So in transit-friendly places, sidewalks should prioritize people with a focus on comfort, connectivity, and safety, especially where pedestrians may conflict with drivers at crossings and driveways. This means features like street trees or benches in the amenity zone, a wide pedestrian zone, and outdoor dining in the frontage zone where possible. The guide explains that in transit-friendly places, generally parks and open space should be active, meaning having programming at different times of day and for different populations. Open spaces should be accessible, both visually accessible, easy to find, and ADA accessible, and comfortable, for example, providing seating and lighting. Open spaces can serve as a gathering spot and source of fun and recreation for a community or even a local or regional transit destination. The guide also discusses best practices for pop-up spaces and temporary uses. The guide focuses on the fundamentals of transit-friendly planning, and more technical information can be found in the blue resource boxes throughout the chapters, like the one displayed in this slide. One of the resource boxes in this section highlights park planning for all ages. As our communities age, it's important for parks and public spaces to serve people of all ages and abilities. New approaches to park design help encourage all ages to play. We included 2 resources to help guide this effort. One of them is a document titled Creating Parks and Public Spaces for People of All Ages by AARP, and another is a web page on planning for aging-friendly communities, included in the Delaware Complete Communities Toolbox. Other resources on this page or in this section of the guide discuss maintenance of open space and stormwater management. And Chapter 3 discusses access, circulation, and parking, and Principle number 4 focuses on implementing transit-supportive curbside management policies. Curb space is a critical public asset that serves many overlapping functions related to both land use and circulation. The active management of limited curb space in transit-friendly communities is vital to promoting efficient circulation, economic activity, equitable access, and multimodal safety. The guide discusses how technology can be leveraged for real-time curb management. There's also discussion of accommodating freight and providing adequate passenger loading and unloading areas to minimize congestion and safety issues. This section highlights the importance of considering pedestrian and bicycle movement and preserving space for streetscape amenities. One of the resource boxes in this section is on curbside management best practices and highlights the Curbside Management Practitioner's Guide by the Institute of Traffic Engineers. The document provides guidance on policy and implementation. This section also includes resource boxes on paratransit and shuttle zones, enforcement of parking and curb regulations, and siting, pickup, and drop-off zones. Chapter 4 focuses on active transportation, such as bicycling and walking, and discusses the importance of implementing complete streets to improve transit access. Transit-friendly planning recognizes that all transit users are pedestrians at some point in their journey and recommends the expansion of active transportation as a primary way of accessing transit. Active transportation has many potential benefits, such as improved health outcomes, reduced traffic congestion, and support for local economic growth. The photos in this slide show how the approaches and elements of active transportation have changed over time. The black and white photos are from the 1994 handbook, also known as the Pink Book, which I showed earlier. They are a snapshot of the time. The updated guide provides a framework for what comes next, and its photos are shown in color. The first principle of this chapter is that complete streets improve access to transit. The term complete streets describes a movement that began about 15 years ago, with the objective to rethink our streets and shift from an emphasis on motor vehicles to a balanced approach that meets the safety and mobility needs of all users, including pedestrians, bicyclists, transit riders, cars, and other vehicles. In this chapter, we point the way to begin answering questions like, where do I start if my community needs to develop a complete streets policy? How can we develop a complete streets network that supports transit access? And what are the basic components of complete streets design? Resource boxes in this section highlight equity and environmental justice. We spotlight APA's Planning for Equity Policy Guide that provides policy recommendations for planners to advocate for equity on all levels. We also included the Rails to Trails Conservancy website and their Equitable and Inclusive Trails webpage. There's also resources on complete streets, transit access, and shared micromobility. And now I'll pass it to Michael to discuss implementation and case studies. And if any questions come up as Michael's presenting, or if you've already jotted some down, you can drop them in the chat and we'll answer them after Tom presents.
Thank you, Celeste. Again, my name is Michael Swan with NJ Transit. Next slide, please. Okay, so the fifth and final chapter of the guide is about implementation, including case studies. So chapters 2, 3, and 4 of the guide really illustrate many outcomes in terms of like development, design, connectivity, etc. But chapter 5 really transitions to moving from the what to the how. The guide really acknowledges that there are a lot of ways to do transit-friendly planning, but I would like to highlight a few that are discussed here on this slide. So next slide, please. Community engagement. So obviously community engagement is a really key component of urban planning or planning in general. And we feel it is also a key component of transit-friendly planning. So the guide really recommends that public as well as stakeholder engagement begins early and happens often. The guide gives tips for one-time as well as continual community engagement, and it does provide examples of different types of engagement, such as walking tours, photo contests, some more out-of-the-box ideas. There are also links to helpful resources, such as the Urban Institute's guide for CBOs, community-based organizations. Their document titled Community Engagement During COVID-19 Pandemic and Beyond, which we felt is a really helpful resource in this COVID era. Next slide, please. Action, really important. So this section continues with info on actions that can proceed without legislation, adoption, or resolution from a governing body. Tactical urbanism is one of these actions, which uses low-cost, short-term materials to demonstrate how a new intervention, such as these bump outs shown here, or a pedestrian plaza, can become a benefit for a community. Another option that the guide discusses is pilot programs. These are often more regulated and allow for any kinks to be worked out prior to a project or intervention becoming more permanent. Next slide, please. So guidance and regulations. Guidance and regulations are another aspect of the implementation toolkit. Transit Supportive Zoning Code is one of the guidance and regulations promoted. It really establishes standards to create an environment that integrates transit service with commercial activity as well as residential development. Transit supportive zoning codes can also generally allow compact development, mixed use, centralized or shared parking, and can also encourage or even require affordable housing, lively public spaces, as well as walkable streets. Next slide. So plans. In the guide, we also get into actual plans. Almost all of the examples that I'll show you in our case studies began with the redevelopment plan process. This is really a core component of what we feel is transit supportive development because it provides an opportunity to revitalize the existing built environment around transit facilities and gives the community control of the long-term vision. We recommend creating a complete streets plan additionally, and the guide does provide examples from Camden County as well as the township of Montclair. We also highlight that municipal master plans and the elements included, such as a circulation element, are important aspects of transit-friendly planning, as well as developing plans with a more specific framework, such as transit area plans, open space and recreation plans, as well as active transportation plans. Next slide, please. So keys to success, we acknowledge that there are many ways that transit-friendly planning can be slow or potentially go wrong. So we do want to provide some guidance to those reading the guide in terms of what we feel are keys to success. So first, really engaging the community. We highly recommend engaging all members of the community, obviously including underrepresented individuals who might not often participate in the planning process. And to that effect, equity should be built into every part of the planning process. So from when deciding who writes plans, which projects to pursue, or how a project should be implemented. Partnerships, obviously partnerships are very important in the planning world. So we recommend building partnerships and engaging with local organizations who really know and are a part of the community and understand the community, as well as all levels of government. Additionally, engaging and securing support from elected and appointed officials early in the process can be very beneficial. And we also really want to reiterate that it's important for the community to understand that significant change does take time, which I'm sure you are all well aware of. Communication with the public should be honest and regular to really manage these expectations. And finally, since planning can be a long process, we highly recommend scoring some early wins. This can really help make the project more tangible, as well as build momentum for creating a more transit-friendly community. Next slide, please. So funding, obviously nothing gets done without funding. So the guide does discuss how to get started, how to find grant opportunities, as well as how to apply for them. We do spotlight the 3 MPOs in New Jersey, which obviously you are all very well familiar with SJTPO, and we reiterate that these are great resources for communities. The guide also highlights grant programs available through NJDOT, such as Safe Streets to Transit, as well as Municipal Aid Program. Ultimately, the details of projects really will determine the best match for funding. The guide does discuss other funding sources such as improvement districts, tax revenue-based funding, as well as P3s, public-private partnerships. Next slide. So the guide does include 5 case studies. So Jersey City, Union City, Metuchen, Delanco and Avondale Park and Ride, as well as Richland Village. Next slide. As you all are very well aware, New Jersey is a very diverse state. So for that reason, the guide does have 5 different place types for creating transit-friendly places. You'll see on the left side of the screen, we go from urban center, which are traditionally our most dense and have the most diverse uses, with a mix of commercial, civic, residential uses, active streetscapes, and often characterized by high employment density as well as housing density, all the way across the screen to the right to our rural places. So often less dense and perhaps less diversity of uses. Rural places are often, we feel, characterized by the small town main street feel, but have historically had a mix of uses in a compact commercial center. It's important to keep in mind that a place type of a given transit facility may change over time, and that guidance from multiple place types may be applicable when looking at the guide. Next slide, please. So given that we are a very densely populated state with a unique range of communities, we did want to map out showing the diversity of place types throughout the state. So you'll see the oranges are station areas that we feel are urban centers. The magentas being urban neighborhoods, and so on and so forth. Our hope is that these place type specific recommendations will help communities interested in making their transit station areas a more transit friendly place. Next slide. So our first case study is an urban center place type, Jersey City's Exchange Place. So what makes it work here, why we felt it's a good example of an urban center, is high density mixed use development throughout the station area, as well as bike ped accommodations. There are wide complete sidewalk network throughout the station area, as well as pedestrian plazas, bike lanes, bike racks, etc. One thing that really stands out with this example is the activated public spaces. The plazas as well as the pier are aesthetically pleasing with ample seating and are often activated with food trucks or community events. In terms of getting that done, as I stated earlier, the redevelopment plan really sets the stage for creating a more transit-friendly place. So the redevelopment plan for this area framed out expectations with regards to density, mixes of uses, and also included standards for private-public partnership development of the Hudson River waterfront walkway. Additionally, other things that assisted was the municipality's Vision Zero plan, as well as a parking management plan that really set the standard for parking prices relative to demand, managing curbside space, and also creating a parking maximum in Jersey City. So next you'll see here is our urban neighborhood example, which we chose Union City's Bergen Line Avenue station. It's the second to last towards the northern terminus of the Hudson-Bergen light rail line. What makes it work here? A bit more medium density in terms of residential, with major employment centers nearby. So a bit smaller in scale than Jersey City, but historically has had quite high density of the area. Bike ped accommodations, similar to Jersey City, the transit area has a complete sidewalk network. This also includes crosswalks, mid-block crosswalks near the station to ensure accessibility from several directions. And as you'll see in the photo, there's ample bike parking at this station. Zoning does help accommodate the historical mixed-use development of the station area, as well as promoting new TOD near the station. Currently, there is I believe a 10-story building with ground floor retail and then 9 stories of residential being constructed just 1 block north of the station. And one final thing to note is the urban enterprise zone. So this station area is within one. So the sales tax that's collected within the urban enterprise zone is returned to the city by the state to make improvements. City officials at first used this to construct a parking garage on Bergen Line Avenue, but it has additionally been used for new street lighting as well as a nighttime trash cleanup program. So that's our urban neighborhood. Next, we will move on to the town center example. So many options to choose from across the state, but we chose downtown Metuchen. What makes it work here? So density, quite smaller in scale in comparison to Union City, but still boasts a really respectable residential density for an inner ring suburb. A recent project also included a 769 space parking garage with bike parking that will serve residents, commuters, and shoppers, so really alleviating the previous parking shortage downtown. Additionally, bike ped accommodations. There is plenty of bike racks as well as a bicycle repair station near the station. There are parklets, pedestrian alleyways from parking to connect to Main Street. And it's, in many ways a very pleasant experience to walk around the downtown, and it shows by the number of people visiting Metuchen. Placemaking also amplifies this. In terms of getting it done, Metuchen really began these efforts to create a more transit-friendly place in the early 1980s. So when malls and shopping plazas were kind of gutting their downtown, the municipality went ahead with adopting a redevelopment plan that includes a design review process that was intended to maintain the character of Metuchen's traditional town center. More recently, the municipality has also made use of overlay zones and additional redevelopment plans to realize more density in the area and also enable public-private partnerships for necessary infrastructure improvements. Similar to Jersey City, there is a SID, a Special Improvement District, the Metuchen Downtown Alliance. They do a lot, it's our understanding that they do a lot to coordinate marketing and programming in the downtown and collaborate with other local partners such as the Metuchen Arts Council, Bike Walk Metuchen, etc. Next slide, please. So Suburban Place, we chose two examples because there are quite a few to choose from throughout the state. First is the Delanco Light Rail Stop in Delanco Township on the River Line in Burlington County. Second is the Avondale Park and Ride, so located in Winslow Township in Camden County. What makes it work for both of these case studies is the residential proximity. Both transit areas are adjacent to existing residential neighborhoods. In Delanco, there is a new multifamily building that was constructed near the station, whereas in Avondale, it's a more traditional suburban subdivision community. Transit amenities, both transit stations have shelters to protect from, obviously, weather. There's seating, ample trash receptacles, sufficient lighting, ticketing and information kiosks, as well as bike racks and also public art. In terms of right-sizing parking, Delanco Station has a smaller community lot as it's a light rail station along the river line, whereas Avondale, being a parking ride with a more regional commuter shed, it has a larger, approximately 460 parking space parking lot. Bike ped accommodations, there are complete sidewalks adjoining to both residential neighborhoods nearby. Avondale, there's actually breaks in the fencing between the parking lot and the subdivision to allow for residents trying to access the bus stop to not have to enter the busy street. In Delanco, there is a new county trailhead that, when complete, will connect the station over a 4-mile stretch to Delran. And again, as we said in other case studies, redevelopment and zoning were integral in this. So the new development in Delanco is the direct result of a recent redevelopment plan. And also in Avondale, or in Winslow Township, a complete streets policy was recently passed by the municipality, which will assist with upgrading sidewalks and completing sections where there are existing gaps. So next, last but not least, is our Rural Place case study example. There were many to choose from, but we chose Richland Village in Buena Vista Township in Atlantic County, which some of you may be familiar with. It is a bus stop for Route 553 on NJ Transit, as well as a stop for the Route 5440 community shuttle. It's interesting because while passenger rail service ended here in, I believe, the mid-30s, the village boasts a really unique bus stop within view of the old train station that's appropriate in terms of scale and also character of the village. The bus stop does consist of a bus shelter with seating, bike racks, lighting, garbage on both sides of the street. But what's really interesting is that the design of the shelter matches the overall community aesthetic. Additionally, in terms of bike ped accommodations, there are complete sidewalks along the road, US Route 40, as well as a 4-lane crosswalk and pedestrian beacon at the nearest intersection. There's also a shared use municipal parking lot at the westbound stop for commuters, shoppers, tourists. And what's really interesting about Richland Village is how the community has embraced its rail history and used that as a catalyst for tourism. So there are tourist excursions at the train station, which are complemented by the Pat Cong Model Railroad Club, as well as the Buena Vista Township Visitor Center. The community also made use of NJDOT's Scenic Route Grant and local bonding to fund updates to the historic train station buildings, the sidewalks, obviously the bus stop, and other amenities. Buena Vista Township, similar to the others, has adopted a redevelopment plan to hopefully entice new development nearby that would really complement, or hopefully complement, the community's historic railroad aesthetic. Next slide, please. So that's our case studies and implementation, but I do really quickly want to show you all some of the online resources that we have that might be of interest to you or communities that you work with. So here's just a quick screenshot of our website. You can visit our website. The link is in the chat. Next slide, please. So some of the things you'll find on our new website. First is the transit-friendly checklist. So we developed this checklist as a tool for communities who might be interested in transit-friendly planning near a particular transit facility in their town. It's relatively quick. It takes about 8 minutes to complete. There's several sections. Here on the screen, you'll see the section regarding land use and development. And ultimately, it's geared towards anyone interested in transit-friendly planning, but specifically communities, because it doesn't produce a quantitative score, but more a qualitative report card that shows areas where perhaps you're excelling, perhaps areas where there's room for improvement, or things that maybe communities haven't thought about that we can assist with potentially in the future. So that's available on the website. Next is the place type test. So I discussed the 5 place types that are in the guide. This is a quick 5-question quiz, and based off how you answer, it will kind of guess which place type is probably most appropriate for the transit facility that you have in mind. Next slide. A few other resources. We have the local plans map. So as Celeste said, our program has worked with communities across New Jersey throughout its 3 decades. Many of those plans are available on that map. You can see where we've worked. Click View PDF and take a look at some of the plans we've worked in partnership with communities to create. And on the right side of the screen, there's a link in the chat to our YouTube channel. But we created 5 short vignettes last summer and fall of each place type to help people reading the guide kind of visualize what these place types might look like in real life right now in New Jersey. So please take a look at those. They're short 1-minute videos. Next slide. So as Celeste mentioned, there is the Transit-Friendly Planning newsletter, which is housed at njtod.org. This is a partnership that we've had with the Allen and Voorhees Transportation Center at Rutgers University for several years. You can subscribe to our weekly newsletter, which features TOD and transit-friendly planning news, not only in New Jersey, but at a regional, national, and sometimes international level. So it's nice to kind of see what's going on out in New Jersey, but also outside of New Jersey. We also have more long-form articles. Most recent ones discussed how to finance TOD. We interviewed 3 practitioners, developers. There's also a nice article about eTOD, so how to incorporate equity into TOD, as well as BRT, so bus rapid transit TOD, and where that's occurring and how to implement that. So here's just an example of some of those articles that are available at njtod.org. Next slide, please. Here's a flyer from a previous event we hosted. njtod.org, we do host approximately twice a year our TOD in Your Downtown Forum series. This one was about how to rethink the right-of-way, so really what COVID did to the right-of-way in terms of like outdoor dining, parklets, etc. That was a really great event, and we anticipate having another event come this fall. Next slide. We also mentioned the transit-friendly data application. It's housed at njlutrans.org. The link is also in the chat. This data application, in partnership with Allen and Voorhees Transportation Center, is a really great tool that we hope will be of use, if you don't know of it, to be of use to you and the communities that you work in. Right here is a screenshot of it using our new total water levels tool around the Newark airport. So this new tool within the data application shows different flooding scenarios based off storms, as well as sea level rise, and what implications that might have for planning in your community. Next slide, please. So a quick overview of the data application. There are quite a few data layers available. We have development information for select geographies. We anticipate incorporating more municipalities in years to come, but there's also demographic information, obviously the transit services provided by NJ Transit as well as others, economic information, and really a plethora of planning and environment data layers. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about the data application. We do have an online tutorial that we'll be posting soon. You can email us for support and subscribe for updates. It does create dashboard reports, so if there's something in particular you're looking to report on, the tool can most likely help. It can also export your data findings in CSV as well as other multiple files. You can save what you're querying. You can also share it, print it. As I mentioned, there are 4 new tools, so the total water level tool being 1, in addition to a corridor planning tool, a TOD opportunity tool, as well as a social justice tool. And so all of those 4 new tools were debuted in February. Again, njlutrans.org. It's completely free, available to anyone. If you have any questions about that, feel free to ask us today or email us. Next slide. So please don't hesitate to check out the website, perhaps take the checklist or complete the checklist, look at previous plans, and feel free to reach out to us via email for more information. We'd love to discuss transit-friendly planning in your communities. But for now, I will pass it over to Tom Morgan from WSP to share information about the Atlantic City Line service analysis.